I still remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no accusations, no tears. It was quiet, like a whisper in the back of my mind. A soft nudge. A flicker of doubt. The kind of feeling you try to brush off, but it lingers like smoke after fire you didn't see coming. It started with little things. A missed call he didn't mention. A strange receipt from a cafe I'd never been to. A look in his eyes that didn't match the words coming out of his mouth. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was tired, that I was being paranoid. But deep down I knew. My name is Alina, and this is the story of how the man I loved, the man I trusted with my heart, my home, my future, lied to me for months. And how I exposed his secret in front of everyone he thought he had fooled. It began on a Thursday night. He'd made dinner reservations at our favorite place, the one with the candlelit tables and the soft jazz playing in the background. I wore the dress he liked. He complimented me, but his eyes didn't linger. His smile was polite.
"Hello. We ordered wine."
He laughed at something the waiter said. But his phone buzzed twice, and he flipped it over without checking. That wasn't like him. Daniel was always glued to his phone. Always quick to respond. Always eager to show me the latest meme or message from work. I leaned in and asked, "Everything okay?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
"Just work," he said.
Just work. 2 words. So simple. So familiar.
But they felt foreign that night.
Like a line rehearsed too many times. Like a door closing in my face. I nodded. I smiled back. But inside, something shifted. I didn't know it then, but that dinner was the beginning of the unraveling. The start of a journey that would take me through heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, justice. Because when someone lies to you for months, they don't just betray your trust, they rewrite your reality. And I was about to rewrite mine. To the world, Daniel was the kind of man people looked up to. He had that effortless charm, the kind that made strangers smile and friends feel lucky. He walked into a room and people noticed. Not because he was loud, but because he carried himself like someone who had it all figured out. Confidence.
Wit. Warmth.
That was the version of him everyone saw. And I'll admit, I saw it too. At least for a while. He was the guy who remembered birthdays, who helped neighbors carry groceries, who sent flowers to his mom every Sunday. At work, they called him the fixer. He could smooth over any problem, close any deal, win over any client. People admired him, respected him. Some even envied him. And I loved him. I was proud to be his partner. I felt lucky.
Blessed.
Safe. He made me feel like I was the center of his world. He'd leave little notes on the fridge. "Missed you today. Can't wait for dinner. You're my favorite hello." He'd bring me coffee in bed on weekends. He'd dance with me in the kitchen when my playlist came on. He'd tell me I was beautiful even when I hadn't brushed my hair in 2 days. That was the Daniel I knew. Or thought I knew. But now, looking back, I realized something chilling. He wasn't just good at being loved, he was good at being believed. He knew how to say the right things. How to look you in the eye and make you feel like you mattered. He knew how to build trust and how to use it. He didn't just lie with words. He lied with gestures, with smiles, with silence. And the scariest part? He made me doubt myself before I ever doubted him. I remember one night, we were at a dinner party. A friend of mine joked about how Daniel was too perfect. Everyone laughed. Daniel smiled and said, "Trust me, I've got flaws. Alina knows." And he winked at me. I smiled back. But inside, something twisted. Because I didn't know his flaws. Not the real ones. Not the ones he kept buried under compliments and charm. He had a way of making me feel like I was the only one who truly knew him. But the truth? I didn't know him at all. I knew the version he wanted me to see. The curated, polished, public Daniel. The man everyone admired. The man who, behind closed doors, was building a web of lies so carefully spun that even I, the woman who shared his bed, his home, his dreams, couldn't see it. And that's what made the betrayal so devastating. It wasn't just that he lied. It was that he made me feel foolish for ever suspecting he could. He'd say things like, "You're the only person I can be real with." Or, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And I believed him. I believed every word. Because when someone tells you they love you with that kind of conviction, you don't question it. You hold on to it. You protect it. You build your life around it. But slowly, I started to see the cracks. The moments when his words didn't match his actions. The times he'd forget things he swore he cared about. The way he'd change the subject when I asked simple questions. And the worst part? He made me feel guilty for noticing. He'd say, "Why are you being so paranoid?" Or, "You know I'd never hurt you." And I'd nod. I'd apologize. I'd shrink. Because I didn't want to be the woman who doubted her man. I wanted to be the woman who believed in him, who stood by him, who loved him unconditionally. But unconditional love shouldn't mean unconditional blindness. And slowly, painfully, I began to open my eyes. Daniel wasn't just admired. He was trusted. And he used that trust like currency, trading it for secrets, for silence, for control. He built a life on admiration. But behind the applause, behind the smiles, behind the perfect image, was a man who knew exactly how to lie without ever getting caught. They say hindsight is 20/20ths. But when you're living inside the lie, everything looks blurry. You second-guess your instincts. You explain away the strange moments. You convince yourself that love means patience, even when patience starts to feel like denial. After that dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. I didn't know what, exactly. But I knew I had to stop ignoring the signs. So I started paying attention. Not obsessively. Not like a detective. Just differently. I started noticing the things I used to overlook. Like the way he'd flinch when his phone buzzed. Or how he'd suddenly need to step outside to take a call. The way he'd smile at his screen, then lock it before I could glance over. These weren't just habits. They were patterns. And patterns tell stories, if you're willing to read them. One morning, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A boutique hotel. Not in our city. Not near his office. I stared at it for a long time. The date matched a night he told me he was stuck in meetings. I remember texting him that evening, asking if he wanted dinner when he got home. He replied, "Too tired. Just grabbing something quick and crashing early." But the receipt said otherwise. It said he'd checked in at 6:42 p.m. It said he'd ordered room service. It said he'd stayed the night. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I needed more. I needed to be sure. So I started keeping a journal. Not for my feelings, though God knows I had plenty, but for facts.
Dates. Times.
Excuses. I wrote down everything. Every odd moment. Every contradiction. Every time his story didn't quite add up. And slowly, the journal filled with red flags. He told me he was working late on Tuesdays. But his car's GPS history showed he was parked near a residential building across town. He said he was traveling for a conference, but his suitcase came back with a receipt from a local restaurant. He said he was with his brother one weekend, but his brother posted photos from another city entirely. It was like watching a magician fumble his tricks. The illusion was breaking. And once I saw the strings, I couldn't unsee them. One night, I asked him casually, "How was the client meeting?" He blinked. "Which one?" I smiled. "The one you said you had at 4. He hesitated. "Oh yeah, it was fine." But his voice was tight. His eyes darted. And I knew he was lying. Again. I started testing him. Asking small questions. Pretending to forget things he'd told me. Watching how he'd scramble to fill in the blanks. And every time he'd trip. Just a little. Just enough. But the most telling clue wasn't in his words. It was in his silence.
He stopped asking about me. About my day.
My work. My friends. He used to care.
Or at least pretend to.
But now he was distant. Detached. Like he was living in two worlds, and I was fading from one of them. I remember sitting across from him at dinner, watching him scroll through his phone. I asked, "What are you looking at?" He said, just emails. But I saw the reflection in his glasses. It wasn't emails. It was a photo. A woman.
Smiling.
Not me. I felt my stomach drop. But I didn't say a word. I just nodded. And I made a mental note. Because that's what I was doing now. Collecting notes.
Clues. Proof.
Not just for me, but for the moment I'd need them. The moment I'd stop pretending. The moment I'd stop protecting him. And that moment was coming. I could feel it. Daniel didn't just lie with words. He lied with smiles. With gestures. With silence. He wore his deception like a tailored suit, polished, convincing, and perfectly fitted to every room he entered. And for the longest time, I believed it. I believed in him. In us. In the life we were building together. But now I was starting to see the seams. The places where the mask didn't quite hold. To his friends, he was the guy who always showed up. The one who remembered anniversaries, who gave thoughtful gifts, who made people feel special. To his colleagues, he was the golden boy. The one who could close deals with a handshake and charm his way through any crisis. To his family, he was the dependable son, the responsible brother, the man who had it all together. And to me, he was everything. Or, at least he used to be. I remember one evening we were at a charity gala. Daniel was in his element, laughing, networking, making people feel like they were the most important person in the room. I watched him from across the table, mesmerized.
He was magnetic.
Effortless. And yet something felt wrong. His eyes scanned the room too often. His smile faltered when he thought no one was looking. He kept checking his phone, subtly, like he was waiting for something or someone. Later that night, I asked him, "You seem distracted." He kissed my forehead and said, "Just tired, love. Long week." I nodded. But inside, I felt the chill of doubt creeping in again. The more I watched him, the more I realized how rehearsed he was. His compliments followed a pattern. His stories had holes. His affection felt timed. Like he was checking boxes. Like he was performing. And then came the moment that shattered the illusion. I was cleaning out the guest room closet, looking for an old photo album, when I found a box. It was tucked behind a stack of books, hidden like it didn't want to be found. Inside were letters.
Cards.
Photos. All from her. The woman he'd been messaging. The woman whose name I now knew too well. There was a birthday card signed, "Forever yours." A photo of them at a vineyard. A note that said, "Last night was perfect. I wish we didn't have to hide." My hands trembled. My breath caught. And in that moment, the mask Daniel wore didn't just slip. It shattered. I sat on the floor, surrounded by pieces of a life I didn't know existed. A life he'd built parallel to ours. A life he'd protected with lies, charm, and manipulation. I didn't cry.
Not yet.
I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I just sat there, staring at the evidence. And I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was living a double life. And he was good at it. Too good. He knew how to cover his tracks. How to deflect questions. How to make me feel guilty for doubting him. He'd mastered the art of deception. And I'd been the perfect audience. But not anymore. That night, I started making copies. Of the letters. The photos. The messages. I backed up everything. I created folders. I labeled them. I started building a case, not just for myself, but for the truth. Because the mask he wore so well, I was going to rip it off.
Piece by piece.
In front of everyone. And he wouldn't see it coming. There's a moment in every story where everything shifts. Where the pain becomes louder than the denial. Where the truth, no matter how ugly, demands to be seen. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Quiet, gray, and unassuming. I was folding laundry, humming to myself, trying to pretend everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore.
Not really.
I reached into Daniel's drawer to put away a shirt, and that's when I saw it. A photo, tucked beneath a stack of papers. Not hidden well, almost like it wanted to be found. I pulled it out slowly, already bracing myself. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. It was them. Daniel and her.
Smiling.
Holding hands. At a beach I'd never been to. He was wearing the shirt I bought him for our anniversary. She was leaning into him, like she belonged there.
Like I didn't exist.
I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. My hands trembled. My chest tightened. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Like the walls were closing in. Like I was drowning in a truth I didn't want to face. I sat down on the edge of the bed, clutching the photo like it might explain itself. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent, damning, final. A snapshot of a life I wasn't part of. A moment he never told me about. A betrayal he never meant for me to see. And that's when I broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just shattered. Quietly.
Completely.
Like glass under pressure. I felt everything and nothing all at once.
Rage. Sadness.
Confusion.
Shame.
How could he do this? How could he look me in the eye every day and pretend? How could he kiss me goodnight knowing he'd kiss someone else that same week? I thought about every moment we'd shared. Every laugh. Every promise. Every time he said, "I love you." Were they all lies? Or worse, were they half-truths? Did he love me and her at the same time? Was I just convenient? I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted justice. I wanted the truth to be louder than his lies. I wanted the world to see what I saw, to know what I knew, to understand that behind the perfect man was a coward who built his life on secrets. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the photo, replaying every moment of our relationship like a movie I didn't recognize. I thought about the first time we met, the way he made me laugh, the way he held my hand like it meant something. I thought about the plans we made, the future we painted together, the home we built. And then I thought about her, the woman in the photo, the woman who knew about me, and still chose to be part of the lie. I wasn't just betrayed by Daniel. I was betrayed by the silence of everyone who knew and said nothing. I could have confronted him right then. I could have thrown the photo in his face and demanded answers. But I didn't. Because I knew something deeper now, something more powerful than anger. I knew that revenge wasn't about rage. It was about truth. About exposure. About making sure the mask he wore was ripped off in front of everyone who believed in him. So, I made a decision. I would stop crying. I would stop doubting. I would stop shrinking. And I would start planning. Because the moment that broke me also rebuilt me. And Daniel? He had no idea what was coming. I never saw myself as the kind of woman who plotted revenge. That wasn't me. I was the fixer. The forgiver. The one who gave second chances even when the first one shattered me. But something changed the day I found that photo. Something deep. Something permanent. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to throw things or beg for answers. I wanted truth. I wanted clarity. I wanted control. And most of all, I wanted him to feel what I felt. Not through anger. Through exposure. So I started planning. It began with a folder. I called it Truth. Simple.
Clean.
I created it on my laptop, password protected, hidden behind layers of files he'd never think to open. Inside, I started collecting everything. Screenshots of messages. Photos of receipts. GPS logs. Calendar inconsistencies. Every lie he told became a line in my timeline. Every contradiction became a clue. I wasn't just documenting betrayal. I was building a case. I started backing up his phone. Quietly.
Carefully.
I learned his passcode. He'd used our anniversary. I copied his texts, his emails, his call logs. I didn't read everything at once. I couldn't. It was too much. But I saved it. Because I knew I'd need it. I began reaching out to people. Not directly. Not suspiciously. Just casually. I asked his coworkers about his travel dates. I asked his brother about that weekend trip. I asked his assistant about his meetings. And slowly, the puzzle came together. He wasn't just cheating. He was lying to everyone. He was using company funds for personal trips. He was forging expense reports. He was manipulating people to cover his tracks. This wasn't just betrayal. It was deception on a scale I hadn't imagined. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't about me anymore. It was about truth, about justice, about showing the world who Daniel really was. I started recording our conversations. Not the casual ones, the ones where he lied, where he gaslit me, where he made me feel like I was crazy for asking simple questions. I kept a journal of his moods, his stories, his inconsistencies. I documented everything. And then I made a list of people who needed to know. His boss, his parents, his closest friends, the ones who defended him, the ones who believed in him. I wasn't going to send anonymous messages or cryptic hints. I was going to show them.
Directly. Clearly.
Undeniably. But I needed the perfect moment. A moment he couldn't control. A moment he couldn't spin. A moment where the truth would be louder than his charm. And that moment was coming. His birthday was in 3 weeks. He was planning a party. Big. Lavish. Everyone he knew would be there. He wanted speeches.
Toasts.
A slideshow of his journey. I smiled when he told me. I nodded. I even helped him plan it. Because that party? That was going to be the stage. And the truth? That was going to be the show. I started preparing the presentation. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just honest. I organized the evidence. I created a timeline. I added photos, messages, receipts. I made it clean, professional, undeniable. I rehearsed my speech. I practiced my tone.
Calm. Steady.
Controlled. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to speak. And let the truth do the rest. And every night, as I worked on the plan, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Strength. Not the kind that comes from anger. The kind that comes from clarity. From knowing you're no longer afraid. From knowing you're no longer fooled. Daniel had lied for months. He'd built a life on deception. But I was about to tear it down, not with rage, but with truth. And he wouldn't see it coming. The thing about betrayal is that it teaches you silence. Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from strategy.
I didn't yell.
I didn't confront. I didn't even flinch when Daniel kissed me goodnight or asked what I wanted for dinner. I smiled. I nodded. I played my part because the trap I was setting needed patience. It needed quiet. It needed time. Every day, I added something new to the folder. A message, a photo, a voice memo. I organized everything into categories: personal lies, professional lies, financial lies, emotional manipulation. I wasn't just exposing an affair. I was exposing a pattern, a system, a man who had built his life on deception and thought no one would ever notice. I started recording myself too. My thoughts, my reactions, my heartbreak. I wanted to remember how it felt, not to punish myself, but to remind myself why I was doing this. Because revenge without purpose is just noise. But revenge with truth? That's power. Daniel was still planning his birthday party. He wanted it to be perfect. He booked a venue, sent out invitations, ordered custom decorations. He even asked me to help with the guest list. I said yes. I smiled. I told him I was proud of him. And every time I said it, I felt the fire inside me burn hotter. I chose my outfit weeks in advance. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just strong. A deep burgundy dress. Simple jewelry. Hair pulled back. I wanted to look composed. Controlled. Like a woman who wasn't there to cry, but to speak. I rehearsed my speech every night. Alone. In the mirror. In the shower. In my car. I practiced my tone. My pacing. My pauses. I didn't want to sound angry. I wanted to sound clear.
Calm.
Unshakable. I created a slideshow. Not flashy. Just facts. Screenshots.
Dates.
Photos. Messages. I added captions. I added timestamps. I made sure every piece of evidence was undeniable. I didn't want people to guess. I wanted them to know. I saved the file to a USB drive. I labeled it for Daniel. I wrapped it in a small box. I tied it with a ribbon. I placed it in my purse. And then I waited. The night before the party, Daniel was giddy. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Tomorrow's going to be amazing." I smiled. "It will be," I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he thought. I barely slept that night. Not because I was nervous, because I was ready. I had spent weeks preparing, months gathering, years trusting, and now it was time. The morning of the party, I got dressed slowly. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize, not because I looked different, but because I felt different. Stronger.
Sharper. Clearer.
I arrived early. I helped set up. I greeted guests. I smiled at his parents. I hugged his friends. I played the role perfectly, because the trap I set in silence was about to spring, and no one saw it coming. When the speeches began, Daniel stood at the front of the room, glowing. He thanked everyone. He talked about his journey, his success, his gratitude. And then he said, "Alina, my love, would you like to say a few words?" I walked to the front. I took the mic. I looked at him, then at the crowd. And I said, "I do have something to share. A gift. Not just for Daniel, but for all of you." I plugged in the USB. The screen lit up, and the truth began to speak. There are nights that stay with you forever. Not because they were beautiful, not because they were tragic, but because they were the moment everything shifted. The moment the truth stood taller than the lie. The moment the mask finally fell. Daniel's birthday party was held at a sleek rooftop venue downtown. Glass walls, soft lighting, a skyline view that made everything feel expensive and untouchable. He wanted it to be perfect, and it was, just not in the way he imagined. I arrived early, dressed in the burgundy gown I'd chosen weeks before. My hair was pulled back, my face calm, my heart steady. I greeted guests. I smiled at his parents. I hugged his friends. I played the role I'd always played, the supportive partner, the quiet strength beside the star. Daniel was glowing. He moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, laughing, making people feel seen. He kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Thank you for making this night so special." I smiled. "It's about to get even more special," I said. And he laughed, not knowing what I meant. The speeches began. His best friend toasted to his success. His boss praised his leadership. His mother teared up talking about how proud she was. And then Daniel took the mic. He thanked everyone. He talked about his journey, his growth, his gratitude. And then he turned to me. "Alina," he said, "my love, my anchor. Would you like to say a few words?" I walked to the front. The room quieted. I took the mic. I looked at him, then at the crowd. And I said, "I do have something to share. A gift. Not just for Daniel, but for all of you." I reached into my purse and pulled out the small box. Inside was the USB drive. I handed it to the technician. "Play the file labeled Truth." The screen lit up, and the room changed. It started with a timeline.
Dates.
Messages. Photos. Receipts. Each slide told a story. A story Daniel never wanted told. A story of lies. Of manipulation. Of betrayal. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Then came the messages. Flirty. Secretive. Time-stamped. Matched against calendar entries that told a different story. Then the receipts. Hotel stays. Dinners. Gifts. All while he claimed to be working late or traveling for business. Then the photos. Him and her. Smiling. Holding hands. At places he told me he'd never been. Wearing clothes I'd bought him. Living a life I wasn't part of. Gasps filled the room. Whispers turned into murmurs. Daniel stood frozen. His face pale. His hands clenched. He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "I trusted him," I said. "I loved him. I built a life with him." And for months, maybe longer, he lied. Not just to me. To all of you. I turned to his boss. He used company funds for personal trips. I turned to his parents. He told you he was working late, he wasn't. I turned to his friends. He made you believe he was loyal. He wasn't. And then I turned to Daniel. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everyone who believed in you. Everyone who stood by you. Everyone who thought they knew you. He opened his mouth. Alina, please. No, I said. You don't get to explain. You had months to tell the truth. You chose lies. You chose secrets. You chose her. The slideshow ended. The screen went dark. The silence was deafening. People began to leave. Some cried. Some stared. Some looked at Daniel like they didn't recognize him. His parents were speechless. His boss looked furious. His friends avoided eye contact. Daniel stood alone. And I walked away. Not broken. Not bitter. Just free. That night, everything changed. The illusion collapsed. The truth stood tall. And the man everyone admired was exposed, not by rage, but by facts. By evidence. By the woman he thought would stay silent. But I didn't. I spoke. And the world listened. The party ended in chaos. Not the kind with shouting or broken glass, the kind with silence. Heavy, stunned silence. The kind that settles over a room when the truth is too loud to ignore. People didn't know where to look. Some stared at the floor. Some at Daniel. Some at me. But no one spoke. No one moved. It was like time froze, and all that remained was the echo of everything I'd revealed. Daniel stood there, pale and frozen. His hands trembled. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Like the woman who had just exposed him was a stranger. But I wasn't a stranger. I was the woman he lied to. The woman he underestimated. The woman who chose truth over silence. His parents were speechless. His mother looked like she might cry. His father looked away. His boss left without saying a word. His friends avoided eye contact. The people who once admired him now saw him clearly, and they didn't like what they saw. I walked out of that party with my head high. Not because I wasn't hurting, I was.
Deeply.
But because I had done what I came to do. I had spoken. I had exposed. I had freed myself from the weight of his lies. The days that followed were strange. Quiet.
Still.
Like the world was holding its breath. Daniel tried to reach out. He called. He texted. He even showed up at my door once. But I didn't answer. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. Because there was nothing left to say.
He lost his job.
The company launched an internal review. His expense reports didn't match his travel logs. His reputation crumbled. The man who once walked into rooms with confidence now avoided them entirely. He became a ghost in the very world he used to command. I moved out. Packed my things with quiet resolve. I didn't cry over the memories. I didn't linger in the rooms we once laughed in. I just left. Because staying meant holding on to a life that was never real. And I was done living in fiction. I started therapy. I needed to understand how I let it go on for so long. How I missed the signs. How I silenced my own instincts. My therapist told me something I'll never forget. You didn't fail. You trusted. And that's not weakness. That's courage. I reconnected with friends. The ones I'd distanced myself from without realizing. The ones who said, "We missed you." The ones who reminded me who I was before Daniel. Before the lies. Before the unraveling. I took long walks. I read books. I sat in cafes alone and watched the world move around me. And slowly, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months.
Peace.
Not the kind that comes from forgetting. The kind that comes from knowing. From facing the truth. From surviving it. People ask me if I regretted it, the reveal, the exposure, the public spectacle. And my answer was always the same. No. Because silence protects the liar. But truth protects the betrayed. Daniel built a life on admiration. On charm. On manipulation. But I tore it down with facts. With evidence. With courage. And I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it to heal me. The fallout wasn't just his. It was mine too. I had to rebuild, rethink,
Relearn.
but I did,
Slowly. Steadily.
honestly. And in the silence after the storm, I found something unexpected. I never got closure from Daniel. Not the kind people talk about in movies, the tearful apology, the heartfelt explanation, the moment where everything suddenly makes sense.
No.
What I got was silence. And honestly, that silence was louder than any apology could have been.
He tried to reach out.
A few texts, a voicemail, one long email that read like a script, full of excuses, half-truths, and lines meant to tug at my heart. But I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already said it in front of everyone. In front of him. In front of the truth. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after the storm. Not immediate. Not easy. But real. I started waking up without dread. I started breathing without weight on my chest. I started smiling, not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer pretending. I thought a lot about what I'd say to him if I ever saw him again. If he ever stood in front of me and asked, "Why did you do it?" And here's what I realized. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it to heal me. Because when someone lies to you for months, when they build a life on secrets and expect you to live inside it, they don't just betray your trust. They betray your reality. And reclaiming that reality takes courage. It takes clarity. It takes a kind of strength you don't know you have until you're forced to find it. I used to think love meant forgiveness. That loyalty meant silence. That protecting someone meant protecting their secrets. But now I know better. Love should never cost you your truth. Loyalty should never silence your voice. And protecting someone should never mean losing yourself. I've changed since that night. Not in ways people can see, but in ways I feel. I trust differently. I listen to my instincts. I speak up when something feels wrong. I don't shrink to make others comfortable. I don't apologize for asking questions. I don't ignore the whisper of doubt. Because that whisper? It saved me. Daniel will probably tell his version of the story. He'll spin it. He'll soften it. He'll make himself the victim. And that's fine. Let him. Because the people who matter, the ones who saw the truth, who heard my voice, who watched the mask fall, they know. And I know. I know that I didn't just expose a secret. I exposed a pattern. A system. A man who thought he could lie forever and never be caught. But he was. By me. And if you're listening, if you've ever been lied to, betrayed, broken, hear this. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for loving. You are human. And being human means feeling. It means hurting. It means healing. But most of all, it means choosing. Choosing truth over comfort. Choosing courage over silence. Choosing yourself. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. So no, Daniel will never hear this reflection. He'll never know the strength it took to speak. The pain it took to stay silent. The fire it took to expose him. But you will. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.